Welcome to the 6-5 podcast. I'm your host today, Daniel Newman, principal analyst and founding partner at Futurum Research. Excited to be joined by my always esteemed, super smart podcast co-host, Patrick Moorhead. Pat, how are you doing today?
Daniel, it's great to see you. Just coming off a great Father's Day weekend. Got outside, got a little sun, got out on the water, and I'm just raring to go here at, 8:23 a.m. in the morning. So
yeah, it's funny. A lot of people will have to give us some feedback on this on the back end. You and I are typically afternoon podcasters. Usually late in the week. That just sort of seems to be our typical time. This last Friday, ahead of a Father's Day, we've been going crazy, busy. We were supposed to record, and the two of us, I think, at the end of the week, we're like, we're just spent. Let's just give it a weekend. We'll decompress. We'll come back Monday morning. But the energy is always different. You wake up on a Monday morning, and your energy level compared to on a Friday afternoon, for most people, is probably not the same.
It's funny though. As I got older, my mornings are so much more productive than the afternoon. So I just need one more cup of coffee or dive right into this podcast, and I'm going to be on fire the whole week. That's my plan. On fire the whole week.
We got a big week ahead. The Apple Worldwide Developer Conference. HPE's got Discover this week. Pat, you and I have some exciting announcements that we can't tell anybody yet on this podcast, but very shortly. Pay attention to our Twitter and our LinkedIn and Facebook accounts, because we're going to be announcing something really special that we're up to. And of course, with all this is going on in tech, it's just an exciting time to be at home, because unfortunately, all travel has been grounded, at least all important business travel. Now, you, of course, I think are about ready to take a little vacay, which is going to be nice. But don't worry, everybody, we're still going to get our podcast in, aren't we, Pat?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to put that N95 mask on, some gloves, and I'm going to get on that airplane. And, my vacations are a little different. I'm an entrepreneur like you, small business owner. So vacation for me means that I won't work 12 hours a day. I might work 3 or 4.
Hey, you know what? I think we all need that. When you work 7 days for 340 days, a couple of 3-hour work days aren't the end of the world. Plus, I got to say, Pat, quarantine has not been a less because even travel, I always joke. I said travel used to be like my little bit of downtime, a 2-hour flight or a 3-hour flight. A lot of times I might work for the first half hour, and then I'd shut down and put my seat back, catch a movie, watch a little TV. I don't have that anymore. And for whatever reason, because I'm so close to my office, so many times I'll eat dinner now, where I used to maybe eat dinner and go watch a show. Now I eat dinner and go back to the office. It's really, I'm not sure it's healthy, but it just kind of is what it is.
Daniel, I think a lot of it's personality driven. I mean, I see time and I occupy it. I mean, look at what we did. I mean, we could have taken that travel time and that time we normally have dinner out for business and just chill. And, what did we do? Well, we created a media company.
Yeah, I mean, essentially a podcast.
In our spare time. And that announcement, which we're not going to talk about yet.
No, we're not. But you know what, everybody, just hang on to your skis, your glasses, your goggles, your T-shirts, whatever you're hanging on to. Hold on. I think it's going to be an exciting ride. Got to get the little bit of business stuff out of the way here. This show, as you've heard us say before, is for information and entertainment purposes only. And while we will be talking about many publicly traded companies and the exciting announcements, advancements, occasionally even the stocks themselves, we are not soliciting or providing any investment advice. So don't buy any stocks, don't make any investments, because anything we say. Pat, you ready to get down to business?
Let's dive in, buddy. Let's dive in.
All right, dude, let's do it. Hey, so just really quickly, 6 handpicked topics, deep analysis on each of them. We try to keep to about 5 minutes per topic. We are terrible at that. Sometimes we go 6, sometimes we do 4, but every topic is handpicked. Everything is about analysis. We try to let you read the news yourself. We try to give you what the news doesn't say. Let's jump in with something really technical, because, hey, on a Monday morning, there's nothing like talking about quantum computing. For everyone out there, last week, Honeywell made a really big announcement. Basically, the company was able to, last Thursday, declare that it's got the highest performing quantum computer. It was able to tout what's called a quantum volume of 64. Now, this is a metric that's essentially was sort of started by IBM, but been picked up across the industry. And the idea is to convey the effectiveness of a quantum computer. This announcement, though, essentially means Honeywell, which isn't always a company that's first to be thought of when you're thinking about computing.
That's right.
Basically, Pat doubled IBM's recent announcement that came just a couple months ago, where the company had been able to proclaim a quantum volume of 32. So Honeywell doubled it. Why is this a big deal? Well, over the past couple of years, the advancements of quantum has been nothing short of remarkable. It's important to note, though, quantum is still a ways away in terms of being used every day the way we use classical computing. Pat, you and I went into the labs of Honeywell. We looked at the machines. We're still kind of trying to figure out, how do you visualize this? How does an application end up on a monitor where somebody can interact with it? But that's exactly what's being done in simulation in the labs. These companies are building simulations to be able to do things like work with fraud detection for banking institutions, to be able to improve the identification of potential compounds that could help solve healthcare crises, things that we're going through. And as I think the most important thing, Pat, and I'll turn this over to you with what Honeywell is doing, is Honeywell and IBM are using two different technologies for their quantum platform. Honeywell is using what's called trapped ion, and IBM's using superconducting. One is a faster. The superconducting is a faster compute. It's I think it's nanoseconds is the speed, the compute time, and trapped ion is microseconds. Both are very fast, but the superconducting is faster. But the difference here is that the trapped ion, what Honeywell's really building its brand around, is this high coherence. And as you understand, there's these qubits, and with this stuff's super technical. But the idea is these qubits need to be stable for the longest possible period of time in order for the computation of these algorithms to be completed. And with trapped ion, each qubit has a much higher coherence rate, which means the loss is less over time, and means that qubit can be used longer in order to complete computation. So not only is this higher volume important from a standpoint of just hitting that next gate, but from a standpoint of using trapped ion, it means that more computation is going to be able to be accomplished with those same number of qubits. At least that's how Honeywell's positioning it, Pat. I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting. Like I said, this stuff kind of blows my mind, but for everyone out there, I think we're all trying to understand, where's quantum going to intersect with real life, and it seems to be coming soon.
Yeah, for those who don't follow tech and nerd history, Honeywell actually used to be a player in mainframes and mini computers. There is a term called bunch, kind of like we use FANG, and it was Burroughs, Unisys, NCR, Control Data, and Honeywell were the big makers of these mini computers. And interestingly enough, in quantum computing, it has a lot to do with properties that favor control systems. And what Honeywell is the leader in is in industrial control systems. So what I think is really cool is this dark horse who has essentially said nothing up until last year, Daniel. And I think you and I were the first people outside of certain three-letter acronym agencies to be allowed even in to see Honeywell's design. And what they're showing now is that based on their approach, it's double the quantum volume. And I consider quantum volume kind of like benchmarks are related to frequency in processors, right? Just like you can't measure the performance of a classical computer with megahertz or frequency of the processor, you can't measure the performance of a quantum computer on qubits alone. Qubits are one variable in that, but what that doesn't do, as you pointed out, is qubits ignore the quality of the qubit, essentially the amount of time that the qubit can do work for you. And that's really where Honeywell's approach comes in, is a higher quality qubit. So great stuff. And the fact that the release said that it doubled the quantum volume performance of IBM is pretty mind blowing. And its go to market is primarily today through Azure. Microsoft and Azure have partnered with 3 companies, and Honeywell is one of those. So some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I think the partnership with Azure is really important because that's where the simulation, that's where the opportunity to utilize the machine without purchasing a machine becomes viable. And Pat, yeah, you make some great points. The volume metric is going to be looked at very closely over the next year. Does that maintain the gold standard? As Honeywell presses forward, I think there's been some questioning if that will be the case. But for now, that's the number. The company is pushing forward, and it's been really an interesting. It's interesting to watch because I love when companies are pushing forward new standards at new speed, because that type of competitiveness leads to innovation at greater pace, and that's really what the world needs right now, Pat.
Yeah. Final comment. What I'm enjoying watching is Honeywell makes a statement, and then people don't believe it, and then they deliver on it. And then Honeywell makes another statement, and then Honeywell delivers on it. And, over time, once you start actually delivering on everything that you say, people are no longer doubters. Yeah. And if you recall, Honeywell has made this commitment to just literally a mind-boggling amounts of degree of quantum volume, which, in my estimation, based on that massive announcement they did a month or so ago, it increased my time to reality from 10 years to 5 years. But we'll have to see. And when I mean reality, I mean people actually using it for more than algorithms.
Yeah, I'm making a note. 5 years, come back and hit you up and see if you're right.
They put that on my calendar.
Best part of our job is you make predictions just far enough out where no one remembers when they're wrong. But then when they're right, we can go back and claim our rightness. Speaking of which, Pat, a couple of years ago, you wrote a great article about Apple and its path to dominating silicon. And by the way, I'm going to put that in the show notes, even though we're not going to talk about that exact topic. This is the week of Worldwide Developer Conference. This is going to be the week where Apple announces its own ARM-based chips that are going to be in its Macs. And Pat, you were one of the first to write about it when everyone said, nah, maybe they're going to make a few odd ASICs for a couple of custom applications. They're not going to get into the silicon business again. It was such a failure when they did it early on. Well, we're back. It's come full circle. And again, not now, but the article is awesome, Pat. I'm not going to let you.
Thank you.
If you start, I don't think I can stop you, but I want to talk about something else. There was an actual segment on CNBC last week that's been followed up with some interesting articles on NBC, on Yahoo. Basically, the founders of Basecamp, so there's David Hansen and his partner, have been really aggressive. Jason Fried, I believe is his name, going out talking about Apple's App Store gangster behavior. Essentially, the company that founded Basecamp, also founded Hey, an email app, has gone out and said essentially dealing with Apple is like dealing with terrorists, in quote unquote, that they're gangster like, that if you don't like the terms of their App Store deal, it's tough and there's no room to wiggle. There's no room. And it's just kind of become this new full circle on the other end of Apple of, this company's big. It does what it wants. It doesn't matter how good your app is. If the company doesn't like what you do or say, basically it can make you. It has the ability to make you as a company. And this is a really interesting sort of pivot because the company has continued to up its rates for participating in the App Store, and it's driven its service revenues up. It's obviously driven the stock price up, Pat, but is there a point? I mean, this is, I think, really the question. I'll let you go first because I have some thoughts on this, but is Apple at the point where it's become a ransom to work and to deliver apps in the App Store? Is this, the analogies I've heard about Apple being the Walmart of tech in terms of like, yeah, you desperately want to be in its ecosystem until you're in its ecosystem, and then you are at its mercy and it basically controls the destiny and the fate of your company's existence?
So Apple's been very clear that its strategy is services. And I think it's going to be services until a new category of product comes out. And that would likely be augmented reality or automotive, right? They need that next big thing. So in the meantime, they need to squeeze as much money out of services as it can. And one of those services is the real estate. I look at it like monopoly, right? Every time you land on a certain property that somebody else's own, you've got to pay them money. And to me, the issue is not that they want money for it, because nobody should do anything for free. We're a capitalist society, and there are benefits, but what you can't do is change. You can't change the game along the way. So today, right, I use iOS, I use Android, I use Amazon ecosystem, but I don't have to pay 3 times for Gmail, right? What I would do is I pay outside of Apple, and I go in and I just log in. If I read a book off of a Kindle, right, I buy it off. I don't buy it from Apple off the app. I buy it on another platform, but I view it there. And that's what Apple should have done, right? What they did is they, at least the way that I understand it, they recalibrated their rule that said you have to have a button that says you can buy here. So you're forced to put a button so Apple can get its 30% cut, and that's the issue here. Now, the incredible irony I find in all this is when it comes to EU, who is investigating Apple a lot. Spotify had a lot to do with this, a complaint, because you and I both know from following Qualcomm and all that fun that you have to have somebody complaining to get an investigation going. And Apple is being investigated by using monopoly power of their app store. And the funny part is that a lot of the things that Apple was accusing Qualcomm of doing, the EU is accusing Apple of doing, which I find incredible. And I guarantee you're going to see Apple's on the record comments be used against it in its own lawsuit. I think Apple needs to check its ego. And I think if it doesn't do it on its own, I can see regulators doing it and helping it for them.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Apple is it doesn't really hold critical mass that would define a monopoly in any market right now. I mean,
depends on how you define it. In the U.S., it has 50% market share of App Store. That, by definition, is a monopoly. So yeah, it all comes to the definition, right?
I guess I was trying to think about the device as a percentage of smartphone devices. But yeah, as in terms of app usage, it has a tremendously big number. It's been interesting because that's the burden of proof that most.
Yeah, it was funny. Remember with Qualcomm, it was all about the definition, and yeah, Apple had created this new market called premium smartphones, right? Not all smartphones, but it was defined as premium smartphones. So
which is subjective.
Yeah. So that's what I think is going to be the game here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just saying it was subjective based upon what Apple defined as a premium smartphone. And yeah, listen, you know me. You can read my writing. I'm no Apple fanboy. I use some of the products. I don't think the company bad products, but I also do think it's gotten a little big for its britches. Europe will likely be the regulator that comes down hardest on Apple. First of all, because that seems to be Europe's path to revenue for its tech community. It does. There was actually an entire segment on CNBC, Pat, that followed up the segment here that basically said, what is Europe doing to actually innovate besides finding companies in the U.S. that innovate? Now, I'm not saying Amazon and Google and Micro and all the companies that the EU is checking don't need to be regulated. they're huge companies. I think that's important that there's a check and balance. I'm just saying it was an interesting segment because I think the commentator kind of went off. Is like, when is Europe going to develop something of its own? But at the same time, that doesn't make it right and wrong. I've always felt Europe's had a very strong approach to regulation and competitive stances. So that will likely be the lead in what will happen to Apple. I will say that as a whole, it's just a little bit too much. It's been too much of a grab. And I think the company knows it has the power and it's taking advantage of it. And to your point, that's exactly what Apple accused Qualcomm of doing. So Apple's a tough company to work with, though. I mean, you hear when companies like Qualcomm and now Intel basically are huge companies with giant resources say, we can't handle this. How is a small company that's building an app supposed to do anything but basically just go with the flow? You build it, you build the app and you're just like, well, I'm going to have to accept whatever the term is because I need Apple. I need to be, it's like a podcaster, needing Spotify, or a musician needing Spotify. It's like, you're going to have to use it because that's where everyone is. So anyways, very interesting stuff, Pat. Let's jump on to the third topic, the Qualcomm 6 series. So speaking of premium tier smartphones, speaking of 5G. See, here's an interesting example. So the 6 series, which is essentially the third tier for Qualcomm, right? They've got the 8 series, they got the 7 series, and now they're launching a 5G 6 series. Pat, I'll let you take this one first since I've been hogging the mic on a few of these ones. But the 690 is the third tier essentially of Qualcomm. Is this a premium tier smartphone if you're using the 690? Because this is where Apple was arbitrarily deciding, but from what I'm seeing, it looks like this is Qualcomm's way of getting more devices into the market at a lower price.
Yeah, I'll hit the very, very highlight here, and Daniel, you hit it. This is 5G everywhere, right? 5G everywhere, where people can profit, right? Everybody can profit. The key part to understand here: this is sub-6 only, okay? Which, at least the way it's looking, that's not going to be an issue in most countries. But the complexity is easier, the BOM cost is lower, and it's an integrated solution, which makes it even less expensive. It's less costly for Qualcomm to manufacture, and it's therefore they don't have to set as high a price. So this, to me, establishes 5G smartphones everywhere.
Yeah, that was, that's the quick difference for me too, Pat. So this one doesn't require a ton of analysis, but my one analysis piece here is very efficient deployments by Qualcomm, getting from its top tier to its next 2 tiers and getting into market, because the company's future is really dependent on seeing 5G proliferate quickly. The COVID-19 pandemic has slowed some deployments of physical infrastructure, but at the same time, the connectivity has been the key to keeping our universe connected. And this is where 5G could speed up connectivity across rural areas. It can obviously in the big cities, it's going to bring new higher security level connectivity into offices. But at this level, the 6 series is really all about getting more devices into the hands of more consumers with 5G capabilities. So let's bounce to the next one, Pat. Cisco last week had its live event. Now, frankly, there was 3 events last week. SAP had Sapphire. SAS had its global forum, and we'll talk a little bit about an announcement that took place there. And Cisco had live, and I'm going to touch on 2 things really quickly, and then I'm going to turn this over to you, Pat. But I checked in for Chuck Robbins' keynote, and I got to say, Chuck has been a bellwether of being in touch with the world. I was very impressed with Chuck using this platform as a defining moment for Cisco, and Cisco really standing out and saying, hey, we're going to be a company that's going to take head on the issues that are going on in the world. Now, we saw a lot of this going on with COVID, but what we're seeing right now with this, with the ongoing equality discussions, has been a lot of companies putting out what I would sort of call standard statements of purpose or intent. And it's good. It's good because it's better than nothing. But I feel that Chuck has just been a tremendous communicator, using Cisco as a company to really talk a little bit more about what can be done, whether that's, making changes in the executive teams, whether that's new hiring practices by the company. And so I just wanted to say that I was really impressed. And Chuck, and social and on Twitter, he's definitely one to follow. But also the company's been very active, financially active, spending its money to back up what it's saying. So it's not just a bunch of feel good sort of tweets and changes to the company's LinkedIn page for a day. So that was the first thing I want to point out. Now, on a much more productized standpoint, we all had to kind of pick our tracks, right, with where we spent our time. I spent the time in the collaboration track, which is with Cisco's WebEx. Now, during the pandemic, Cisco WebEx, Zoom, Microsoft Teams have been the superstars of the show. For the last couple of months, we've spent a ton of time. So basically, the company had a big series of small announcements. If I have to kind of put forward what the focus was of this, right now, WebEx has had to play catch up. The product's really solid. It's been continuously improved, but we've all seen what's happened to Zoom over this period of time. Zoom has seen the lion's share of media voice. And then Microsoft Teams came out of nowhere, basically from barely focusing on the product to growing like 700%. Well, WebEx Teams has been maybe the most established platform for the longest period of time, but the company really spent a lot of investment on two areas, Pat. One, improving the control plane of WebEx, and two, keeping its class-leading security standards in place. Now, there was other things that were being done to WebEx, lots of small, like I said, small adds and small changes. But what is impressing me is that Cisco has the trust of the CIO. Cisco has long had its place in the data center, networking, connectivity, and when it's come to WebEx Teams, the thing here is that as we've seen Zoom grow, Zoom has had major security faux pas, and Cisco is really leaning hard into making sure its platform is the most secure, has the most encryption availability and true encryption, unlike what we've heard from certain other vendors along the way. And I think that's really where the company intends to lean as we scale, has been back-end infrastructure so that companies can grow connectivity, and they can make sure that the teams and collaboration tools that are being used are secure. So again, I realize I bounced between one very broad topic, Pat, and one very specific product topic, but because live is such a massive event, I figured that might be helpful to give some specific context. But hey, what caught your attention at Cisco Live this year?
Yeah, so just in the spirit of time here, I agree with what you said about Chuck and corporate social responsibility. And to me, companies who have been doing it the longest make a positive impression on me, because it's not, it's less of a marketing thing than it is a reality thing. On the WebEx announcements, and this is going to sound just nuts, I think that WebEx reinforced how it is an enterprise tool and not trying to be a consumer play. And while it's absolutely not sexy at all, the new data loss prevention, or as we say in the industry, DLP features they brought out to support things like HIPAA, to help with lawsuits, all of these types of things, I think just separate it black and white from, let's say, a solution like Zoom. I mean, sure, the box integrations were sexy and a lot of people were buzzing about it, but what solidifies Cisco as an enterprise tool isn't a box integration, it's DLP, and I think they should get a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I thought that was a big one, Pat. So speaking of corporate social good or corporate social responsibility, let's touch base on Amazon. So last week, Pat, Amazon basically announced that it's pushing forward with its Paris Agreement, and it's looking to carbon neutralize 10 years early. And then it added emphasis from India as its second big signee to the agreement. Very interesting stuff, Pat.
Yeah, it is. And in true Amazon format, right, they couldn't just come in and say, yeah, we're going to agree with the Paris Accord. They had to say, we're going to hit it 10 years earlier in 2030. So literally, what this agreement says is they're going to hit the Paris Accord for things like energy and carbon 10 years before countries who've signed up to that. And I think that's pretty cool. And if you look at the things that Amazon does, and in addition, AWS, their data centers take a heck of a lot of power, right? The cardboard packaging that they use uses a lot of trees. The transportation that they use to get from the airport to a distribution center to your front door creates a lot of carbon. So while I get excited at that they're 10 years early, I think what I'm more excited about is how they're going to actually do that. So what I'm guessing is we're going to see a lot of electric vehicles, right? We're going to see a tremendous amount of energy reduction when it comes to data centers, right? And renewable energy that all of those AWS and Amazon data centers do. So it's pretty cool at a time that I know that it's fun to tee off on Amazon because they're big and they're worth over $1 trillion, and their founder and CEO is the richest, man on the planet. Even after getting a divorce and giving half his assets to his ex-wife, they do some really great stuff that I don't think should be ignored and should be applauded.
Yeah, Pat, I think that you made some great points. I'll only add a couple of things. The year was 2040, so the company's ambitions is to do it 10 years sooner than that, which means, that's very impressive. The other thing that you said, I think we just got to reiterate is, look, Amazon is a big company. It does challenge a lot of industries, and it's certainly been disruptive to a lot of companies, but you cannot be upset with the great disruptions when you're in a society that inspires this type of capitalism, this type of innovation, this type of push forward. So when these companies give back and do good things, we need to give credit. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to push to innovate your own business, but we also need to be able to raise our hands and say, good job, round of applause. And also, by the way, just one other point, Microsoft, Dell, Intel, many companies now are kind of really starting to step up in terms of their conversations about this topic. And this is good. This is one area where the more the merrier. I invite all the tech industry to say, hey, let's protect Mother Earth. So that's good stuff. Last topic, Pat. I know we've run a little long because I'm a little long-winded on Monday mornings. That's a note about doing podcasts in future Monday mornings. Is Dan apparently talks too much on Monday mornings. But last week, early in the week, SAS Software, the privately held company based in North Carolina, one of the world's largest multi-billion-dollar analytics firms, though, made a big announcement of moving its platform and basically inking its first big cloud partnership with Azure. And this was a big deal because SAS has been slowly building its sort of quote unquote cloud story, but has not really stepped up and made any sort of proclamation of, hey, this is the cloud we are going to move forward with. Long story short, as I saw it, there was only two choices. It was either going to be Amazon, AWS, or it was going to be Azure. There was probably a case for both because AWS doesn't have quite as big of a data analytics backbone and other softwares like Dynamics and everything that Azure does. But there was just a lot of really great symbiotic partnerships of connecting SAS's platform to Azure, Dynamics 365, Microsoft 365, Power Platform, IoT platform, and more. So it ended up winning out. I'm guessing based upon the synergies there, the ability to build SDKs and connectivity to be able to run SAS's software in the data center, but also the IoT and the edge capabilities all together in a fairly seamless, quick to roll out app. And like I said, for advanced analytics and visualization, SAS is absolutely one of the leaders. And I think the two companies together creates a really powerful series of tools that could be important in everything from finance and retail to manufacturing and public sector. So very encouraging partnership. I think this is really big news for SAS. It's, of course, a nice win for Microsoft, but Scott Guthrie, who doesn't, just come out for anything, and his red polo, one of the leaders of the Azure team, came on, talked all about it, was really enthusiastic and excited. And I think we're going to see some really great advancements for SAS, and then of course for Azure, as these two companies blossom. Pat, I don't know if you had much chance to catch up on this, but it was definitely worth noting, because for SAS, it's one of those really, really big little companies in the world. And it's a really important platform from an analytics standpoint. And choosing Azure was a big decision.
Yeah, I think you hit it really well. I think that SAS was a little bit late in cloudifying their offering. And note that Azure is the preferred cloud. They'd be foolish to limit it to that, because there's a lot of the world, in fact, most of the world that runs on AWS. So I'm expecting some future tactical announcements with folks like IBM Cloud and AWS, and probably GCP would be the last one.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it could even find itself making partners with Oracle, because all the clouds, it doesn't make sense to close any doors, but I think announcing a strategic partner was a big decision. It was a strategic decision, and the company must have felt there was more upside to be tightly aligned to one than not. But I think, to your point, this may also be a starting point, and there may be in a series of future type of announcements, because SAS isn't closing off any connectivity to other clouds. It's just basically saying, if you're looking for the fastest way to take your SAS deployment and move it to the cloud, we're going to make it very simple in Azure. And we're seeing a lot more software developers picking that. It was kind of like when Zoom picked Oracle. It's just like, it's not, we're seeing more and more companies sort of pick a cloud, but there are plenty of softwares that you can say, well, we want to run in this other cloud. And it's totally achievable. So I think some of this is also just great partner headlines and quotes, Pat, that basically lead to headlines in the news and in the media, and get analysts like us talking about it.
And here we are.
Great point. So anyways, everybody, I want to say thank you. This is a great episode, Pat. I always appreciate your time. I realize we were a little heavy on the first topics, maybe a little quicker on the last ones, but that's why we try to keep you on your time, keep you on your day. What a Monday morning. What a way to start our week. For this episode of the 6-5, I want to say thanks, everybody. Hit that subscribe button if you like what you're hearing, and keep yourselves plugged into Pat, and our Twitter handles and stuff, because we have some big announcements, some really exciting announcements, and we're super we are really thrilled to be sharing with you what we're about to. But I guess for now, we're just going to have to keep teasing you along. You're just going to have to wait. So for this episode, for Patrick, for myself, we'll see you guys later.